With wildfires, there's before and after. Before, the flames, the wind, the heat, the threat.
We have no idea how Idana or Detroit are.
And after, it was already too late.
At this time, they're probably all the way burned up.
Now, satellite photos put the before and after in grim perspective, side by side. And while Mayor Wheeler sues to end the federal deputization of his own police officers, a former federal prosecutor says this actually happens a lot more than you might think.
No, that's a red herring.
And speaking of the mayor, KGW finally did speak to him one-on-one after trying literally for months. And he says rumors of Portland's demise have been greatly exaggerated.
No, it's not accurate at all.
But, things aren't perfect. There's a pandemic, social unrest, homelessness, economic devastation, record unemployment, and a challenger leading in the polls. And did we mention they're debating on Thursday? Lots to talk about. So, here's the story.
And I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to The Story. I want to say, as we get started here, we're getting so many emails and messages from people who feel like we are not getting back to them fast enough. And I just want you all to know, I hear you. We are coming up with a plan. I sent an email about it tonight. We're going to get the team together and come up with a plan to make sure that everybody knows that you are being heard, and you are being heard. I just think the audience of this little show grew a little faster than any of us could ever imagine, which is a good problem that I'm willing to deal with. So thank you. In the meantime, keep piling on, all right? Send those comments and questions to the story at kgw.com. Find me on Facebook and Instagram, or use Twitter in the hashtag HeyDan. Or do what this guy did the other day when he walked up to me and said, "Hey, are you Dan?" Then wait for me to say yes, then say, "Hey, Dan," and immediately walk away. It's technically not a question, but I'll take it. Let's do some news. Now, it is kind of hard to believe. It's been almost a month right now since those historically massive wildfires exploded across Oregon. Now, in those early days, we spent a lot of time, first helping people be safe, get to safety, then reported on the fires as they spread and the firefighting efforts to stop them. And now we've been talking a lot about the recovery. But it was clear through all of this that there was one question that a lot of you wanted the answers to. James Umfleet emailed us, do we know how the really big wildfires like Beachie Creek, Riverside, Lions Head, Holiday Farm, and Archie Creek, how these fires started? It's a really good question, James. I'm curious about all this as well, and it's one we've been working really hard to answer, along with firefighters, of course, and investigators up and down the West Coast. See, the problem is, it's really tough to answer these, and we still might not know that answer for months, if not longer. But we do learn more every day. And that brings us to our big story. We're going to focus specifically on one of those fires that James mentioned in his email to us, the Beachie Creek Fire. For the first time, we're seeing these jaw-dropping satellite images that show some of these towns along Highway 22 before and after that fire swept through the Santiam Canyon. Kyle Aboshi learned more about how this gigantic fire went from what was originally just a smoldering 10-acre burn to one of the most devastating megafires Oregon has ever seen.
And it's all around us. There's nowhere here that doesn't have fire. Winds of about 60 miles an hour. It's pushing it toward us. We have no idea how Idana or Detroit are. But at this time, they're probably all the way burnt up. This is all we have here.
Fueled by extreme winds, the Beachie Creek Fire exploded.
Oh my God, come on. That's the whole lot of gates right there.
Walls of fire and smoke raced through the Santiam Canyon. Police and firefighters dodged falling trees and boulders on Highway 22 to help get everyone out of the mountains.
There's fire on both sides of the road, and I don't know at what point trees are going to start falling on it.
It was a frantic escape, and not everyone survived. The Beachie Creek Fire had been smoldering in a remote part of the wilderness for weeks. So how did a 10-acre fire become one of the most destructive wildfires in Oregon history? We analyzed satellite images, photos, video, incident reports, weather forecast, and first responder radio traffic.
Multiple spot fires.
To reconstruct how this wildfire simply erupted. On the morning of August 16th, a small plume of smoke could be seen in the Opal Creek Wilderness, 75 miles east of Salem. The Beachie Creek Fire burned 10 acres. Fire officials listed the cause as unknown, although a lightning storm had started several other fires across the Cascade Range. Time-lapse video showed a column of smoke from the Beachie Creek Fire, which was burning on a steep mountainside, making it nearly impossible for fire teams to access on foot. Instead, helicopters dumped water, and crews worked to create a fire line, hoping the Beachie Creek would eventually burn itself out by fall. This stubborn fire remained relatively quiet through August. Images from early September showed the smoke. The smoldering Beachie Creek Fire grew very slowly in the hot, dry conditions. Then, everything changed. As the Labor Day weekend came to an end, the winds started to roar.
There's Piety Island there in the middle of Detroit Lake. Got about 30 civilians here.
Overnight on September 7th, the Beachie Creek Fire and another huge fire to the east, the Lion's Head, exploded. The two wildfires started to merge as they charged up mountainsides and across ridgelines, pushing west towards Highway 22. Small communities like Detroit, Gates, and Mill City stood right in their path.
Just letting you know it's still coming down the hill towards Detroit.
The National Weather Service had warned for days about extremely critical fire risk due to hot weather, followed by strong winds. Forecasters described the early September weather pattern as something that occurs only 2 to 4 times a century, explaining the wind event is literally off the charts for this time of year. As a precaution, some level 2 evacuation orders were already in place. But the powerful gusts, clocked at more than 50 miles per hour, created another problem. Officials say downed power lines started nearly a dozen spot fires along Highway 22.
Be advised, OSP is stating that power lines are coming down near Mill City.
Per OSP, Highway 22 and 7th Avenue in Mill City, power lines are down across the road for those coming and going.
I copy that.
The spot fires spread quickly, energizing what now had become a megafire. Suddenly, flames surrounded small mountain communities. Firefighters and sheriff's deputies went door to door.
How close to the road is it? We're still trying to wake some people up and get them out of here.
The Beachie Creek Fire would become one of the largest blazes in state history. Satellite images show the path of destruction. The lakeside resort town of Detroit before, then after. And the neighboring community of Gates, seen here. What started as a small fire in a remote part of the wilderness would scorch nearly 200,000 acres and decimate thousands of homes and buildings in its path. At least 5 people lost their lives. Fire crews estimate the Beachie Creek will continue to smolder into winter, and recovery in the Santiam Canyon will take much, much longer.
Our Kyle Laboshi reporting there with help from photojournalist Gene Cotton. They put that together, and those satellite maps, man, it tells a lot, doesn't it? We have a tool up for you right now if you want to go back and look at some of that. KGW.com, you can look at those photos and that slide bar as you kind of go back and forth to see the before and after the fire. We have photos of Detroit, Mill City, Gates, and the Santiam River. It's sobering to see this, and it reminds us how many people still need help and how much help they really need, which is why we continue to tell you about this and remind you that we are continuing to accept donations to the Northwest Response Fund through the Red Cross. I mean, since these fires, the outpouring of support has been amazing. $1.8 million, which will go straight to fire relief. But it's shocking sometimes how such an enormous amount of money doesn't go as far as you would think when you consider how much damage has been done. So if you want to give some more, you can head to KGW right now, kgw.com/Red Cross. And thank you to everybody who has helped out. Now, this has not been the easiest year, you could say, to be the mayor of Portland, to be Ted Wheeler. He's taken a lot of criticism from both sides about how he's handled the protests and the violence this summer, and then how he's handled the police response to that. And at this point, he's facing what's shaping up to be a really tough re-election attempt. To make matters even worse, this happened during a city council training session on white supremacy.
With that in mind, we'd like to open up the discussion with a few thoughts.
By the way, are you going through my emails on my campaign email account ? It seems like there's a lot of emails there that are relevant, and I don't know if they're going to your folder as well, period.
Mayor, I think you need to mute yourself.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I apologize. It was multitasking.
Oh, man, honestly, the mute button is going to be the end of all of us, really. But to add insult to injury there, the Willamette Week reporting a new DHM research poll, and it shows Mayor Wheeler trailing his challenger, Sarah Iannarone, by 11 points. I mean, this is somebody who was at once thought to be a long shot. Now, 41% of people surveyed say they support Iannarone, compared to just 30% for Wheeler. Now, a big chunk, 29%, say that they are undecided or are writing in a different candidate. Now, Wheeler's campaign believes the reason so many people are undecided right now is that most voters are just now starting to pay attention to this race, which could be the case. There's a lot going on. His campaign manager told us, quote, "Our internal polling shows that we're in position to win and that we have a clear path to victory. We are confident that once voters have the opportunity to get to know both candidates, these numbers more decisively will move in Ted's direction." Well, if by chance you were one of those undecided voters, you were going to get a chance to learn a lot more about these two this week. In fact, you know what? Why don't we start right now? Because our team got both Mayor Wheeler and Sarah Iannarone on the record one-on-one just this week. And we asked about the issues we know have been on your mind, starting with economic recovery for businesses in downtown Portland. First, let's hear from the mayor.
It is accurate to say that downtown is struggling under the nightly violence, under the decreased economic activity as a result of COVID, the fact that people aren't coming downtown to offices at all as a result of the COVID crisis itself. And of course, with nobody being downtown in large numbers, we have huge livability issues. There's increased litter, there's increased graffiti. All of these things can be solved. Number one, we are bringing to an end the nightly violence, and we're already seeing that tail off. Number two, we need to find humane solutions to get people off of the sidewalks and off of the streets into better alternatives elsewhere. Number three, we need to clean up the city, and I'm announcing an aggressive strategy around litter collection and graffiti abatement throughout the downtown core, Old Town, Chinatown, the entire I-405 corridor. And last, and perhaps most importantly, we need to work with the business community to help businesses reopen as safely as they can under the COVID restrictions so that employees come back downtown, so that customers feel safe coming back downtown. All of these things need to happen simultaneously, and they're already beginning to happen.
Travel and tourism is a great one to get those dollars flowing through downtown and back into those hotels and restaurants located there. Travel and tourism, not just for recreation and leisure, but for business. I've been talking a lot with the film and TV industry. And what does it mean for us to get those shoots happening here again? You know, these outside production companies that come here to film, they need catering, they need transportation, they need hotel rooms. And so how can we be stimulating the economy through that industry? Because, you know, it's something that we are known for. It's a sector that's growing. So that's another thing that we could do. What could we do as a municipality to make investments in downtown retail space? I see opportunities for us to get minority and women-owned businesses into some of these empty retail spaces as pop-ups, giving them opportunities as we unlock from COVID, if you will, or open back up the economy. Can we create opportunities that might not have been there before for some of our underrepresented groups through business investments? I see that as a great opportunity.
Now, of course, if we're talking about downtown, you can't do that unless you talk about the protests and the violence and the police response to all of that, which dominated the conversation this summer. Here's the mayor's take on that.
We need our officers to go back to being street cops, to being there to reduce opportunities for crime, to be there to talk to people in our community, residents, neighborhood associations, business owners, and operators. We need to go back to that and not have them standing on the line each and every night. I believe I'm speaking for a majority of Portlanders when I say the violence and the criminal destruction we are seeing is separate and distinct from the Black Lives Matter movement, which I support 100%. I support racial justice and equity. I support common sense police reform. That's why I put my own 19-point plan forward. But there is no circumstance under which I believe violence or criminal destruction is a means to a political end. It's unacceptable. It doesn't comport with Portland values, and I will never support that.
Now, remember, this is important. Wheeler also serves as Portland's police commissioner, which the mayor often does. And earlier this year, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty asked to take over that job. She wanted to be commissioner as a more aggressive critic of police, which could probably be an understatement. Now, see, Wheeler never gave up the reins, and in the past had said that he doesn't think she'd be the right fit for the job because of some false statements that she made to Marie Claire magazine. She said at the time, without proof, that police were lying about the damage to downtown and starting fires themselves, which of course isn't true at all. She later apologized, which apparently was enough for Sarah Iannarone, who supports Hardesty as police commissioner.
And I believe that that's a huge step forward in rebuilding peace between the public and local government. One of the reasons we continue to see protests night after night, and even the creation of the narrative around unsafety, whether or not that safety is truly there or not, has to do with a lack of trust. People don't know what to believe. They don't know what the path forward is. And so making a concerted effort on day one to say, I hear you, you're calling for new leadership on this front. Let's make Commissioner Joanne Hardesty the police commissioner. I will function as the chief policymaker, and I will work from the mayor's office, and we'll work in cooperation with DA Schmidt, who was also elected by an overwhelming majority this May. The three of us together can really help bring the city together behind a shared vision of what we're going to do for public safety moving forward.
Now look, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, you could do a lot on this. That's why these candidates are going to be talking about these issues during Thursday night's debate, hosted by KGW and the Oregonian. You can watch at 7 o'clock right here, or on kgw.com, or on the KGW YouTube channel, or at OregonLive.com.
When the story continues. What's that saying about assumptions? Well, after the feds deputized 56 Portland police officers ahead of that Proud Boys rally last month, Mayor Wheeler assumed they'd be deputized for the weekend, and he assumed wrong. Now Portland has 56 deputized Portland police officers for the rest of the year. So why are so many of our top leaders not on the same page? A former federal prosecutor thinks he knows.
Welcome back to the story. Those commercials are great, aren't they? Don't forget, join the conversation on my Facebook page. You can hit us up on Twitter, too, using the hashtag HeyDan. Now, earlier in the show, you heard from Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler and his opponent, Sarah Iannarone. Now, if there's anything that we know about being the mayor of Portland over the years, it comes with a couple of curveballs, you could say, and this was a big one. The federal deputation of 56 Portland police officers, which Mayor Wheeler said he initially thought lasted only 2 days. Turns out it lasted through the end of 2020, which is a lot more than 2 days. And considering, the way 2020 is going, it's probably going to feel like 10 years. And now the mayor said he is willing to go to the Supreme Court to reverse this if he needs to. Now, like most things this year, it's gotten extremely political and extremely divisive, on top of the fact that there are a ton of rumors about what this whole deputation process and what it all really actually means for the city. So to try and calm the waters a bit, we turn to a former federal prosecutor who's handled a fair share of these cross-deputation cases before. Maggie Vespa asked him what Portlanders and the people running our city should keep in mind.
The federal deputation of dozens of Portland police officers came after more than 100 days of protests in the city. Somewhat ironically, it came in anticipation of a protest that didn't erupt into chaos.
I'm just sick and tired of what they've allowed to happen in Portland.
One Saturday late last month, the Proud Boys, a far-right extremist group, held a rally here. Thousands were promised. A fraction showed. A relief to local leaders who had called in law enforcement from all levels. Declaring a state of emergency, Governor Kate Brown had authorized the feds to deputize 56 Portland police officers. City officials assumed that deal would end with the weekend. Turns out it lasts the rest of the year. Mayor Ted Wheeler, who has opposed the presence of federal officers in Portland, has instructed the city attorney to challenge the deputations in court.
How common is this particular event?
For some clarity, we turned to former Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Pfeiffer.
Okay, there's I think a lack of information in the public about the fact that this is extremely common to have law enforcement cross-deputized.
For example,
the deputy sheriffs who work in the Justice Center managing the inmates are cross-deputized, most of them, because they also manage federal prisoners. There are many task forces over the years involving child pornography, bank robbery, drugs, firearms, in which members of local law enforcement have become deputy U.S. Marshals. And
Pfeiffer made it clear he is not privy to any of the back and forth between federal, state, and city leaders. That said, his take? In this case, political divides made for poor communication. And as to why federal authorities, including current U.S. Attorney for Oregon, Billy Williams, have refused to end the designation?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the DA, the new DA.
Pfeiffer sees it as the Fed's way to work around Multnomah County's new district attorney, Mike Schmidt. Earlier this year, Schmidt announced he would not pursue nonviolent, low-level charges against protesters. He's given multiple interviews on the policy. In a statement, writing, "It's designed to focus limited prosecution resources on violent crimes that include property damage." The mayor says he supports the DA's policy. Williams has made it clear he does not. Which brings us to a question that we've heard from protesters and from others, and that's, does the deputation of these 56 Portland police officers mean that anyone they arrest can more easily, or even automatically, be charged with a federal crime? Pfeiffer had a clear answer, and he pointed to one statute in particular.
No, that's a red herring here, because under the statute, under Title 18, Section 111, which allows well, it makes it illegal to assault a federal officer. That officer has to be acting officially as part of his official duties at the time. So if police officers for the city of Portland who've been cross-deputized are simply out, performing their ordinary duties and no federal duties involved, no federal action involved, then they're not protected by that statute.
We reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office for comment. We haven't yet heard back. Maggie Vespa, KGW News.
And when we come back, we're going to answer a question that we keep getting a lot more than most. We're also going to read what somebody had to say during tonight's show. We're getting a lot of feedback there, so we're going to finish up the story after this. So we're getting more and more questions about election deadlines, and that's really important stuff right now. So here are the key dates that you need to know in both Oregon and Washington. We want to start in Oregon for you. The deadline to register to vote is October 13th. That is next Tuesday, okay? That's coming up quick. Ballots and voter guides are mailed out the very next day on October 14th. The deadline to mail your ballot back is October 27th, but you don't have to mail them, all right? You can actually place them, you know this, in an official Dropbox location as late as 8 p.m. on Election Day, which is November 3rd. Talking about Washington deadlines now, ballots in Washington will be mailed out on October the 16th. The deadline to register to vote online or by mail is October 26th. So you got a little bit, the timeline's a little different there than in the two states, but you can register in person all the way up to Election Day, which is November 3rd. You can either drop your ballot into an official Dropbox there by 8 p.m. on November 3rd, or you can mail them as long as they are postmarked by Election Day. Did you get all that? Maybe not. If you missed a date or something like that, of course, you can find all this stuff on kgw.com, and you can find them on the Secretary of State's websites in both Oregon and Washington. We got some comments here coming in. The first one is coming from, what is the latest on the protest? This one's coming from Steele on Twitter. What's the latest on that? I heard they were decreasing. If so, why? So, if so, why? That's probably a really complex and difficult answer, but that's something we're following up on. So, stay with us and we'll see if we can answer that as we kind of move forward here. Then we got one from Beth Aldoff. She tweeted, how much of the Red Cross donation actually makes it to those who need it? So the answer is the Red Cross says that all the money donated to the relief fund goes to help the wildfire victims. Now, we kind of lowballed the answer a little earlier about how big the money is up to $2.1 million. To give you some ideas of how they parcel that out, more than 57,750 total hotel. I can't talk. Why can't I talk? It's my first day back. I was on vacation for a little while. Hotel stays have been provided since September 7th. So a lot of hotel stays, more than 164,000 meals have been served, more than 4,000 comfort kits have been made. So all of that different stuff kind of adds up over time. But as we said, even a number as big as 2 million doesn't quite go as far as you'd want it to when you see the devastation that we have suffered in this area. So keep those donations coming. Everyone's been so generous so far. I know you have more in you. Appreciate it so much. That's the story. I'm going to work on not stumbling over words. I'll be back tomorrow. Stick with me. I'll see you then.